you struggle with long term life planning? Figuring out what to do with your life. Maybe you're in high school trying to figure out what the next move is. Maybe you're in college trying to declare a major. Maybe you've already started your career and it's not really going the direction that you want, and you're thinking about making a major pivot. Are you trying to decide where and how to build your life? Now, these questions, everyone has them. They're not easy, but they're definitely one of the fundamental building blocks that help us build a successful life. Now, it stems from this anxiety provoking question that we get asked when we're really young, and we continue to ask ourselves this question really throughout our life. What do you want to be when you grow up? When you grow up, when you're old enough to do everything by yourself. Most of the time, when you're asked this question, you have no idea all the variables that are tied into it. What about money? What about career changes? What about what I'm good at? What I'll like in 40 years? All of those questions, there's no way you could possibly give a clear and concise answer. So you default to something that you think would hold your interest and sounds cool. Want to be a fireman, astronaut, YouTuber, something like that. Well, really, it's not about what you're going to be. It's who you're going to be. You have to plan your life and not your career. Because if you build your entire life around a career, what happens when it all comes crashing down? There's that anxiety. It all comes crashing down. Well, you see, when this was a really common question, you would ask a child when they're 5, 6, 7, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then the adults around them would listen to the answer, pay attention to what that kid is good at, what they show interest in, and really foster a bit of learning and development around a career plan. It doesn't help that during this time that it was really plausible to have a job for a majority of your career. You go to work, you might work for one or two companies throughout your life, you collect a pension and retire on time, and life is just normal like that. We don't have that luxury today. Chances are you're going to change jobs every 2 to 5 years. You're going to be laid off a couple times in your life. You're going to experience major career pivots for whatever reason, and then throw in a couple of technological disruptions along the way. We don't get the luxury of picking what we want to be for the rest of our lives, or at least the majority of us don't. So let's separate those. And let's start with just planning our life, taking career out of the equation. It's not a question of what you want to be when you grow up, but who do you want to be? Now, one thing that I like to do, and I've found a lot of good information in this thought process, but it's breaking life into decades. So let's do that. Let's just break down the average lifespan in decades for a minute. From 1 to 10, so the first 10 years of your life, you're just trying to figure out what the world is. Sky blue, trees green. You learn to walk, talk. You learn how to interact with adults and children alike. You learn how to play. You learn all of the very basics about what makes this world up. Well, that only takes you so far. And so by the time you turn 10 and probably all the way up until 20, you're really there learning how the world works. You start to figure out, how do I learn? What do I actually need to know beyond basic physics of fall out of tree, it hurts? No, you have to figure these things out. Like, what is money? How do relationships actually work? What is an economy, a civilization? What are the rules, and how do I fit in with all of that? You are just learning how the world works, enough to progress you into actually participating in it. So after you hit Your 20s, you're now in the throes of life. You are doing the work. There's nobody there to catch you when you fall. You are now a fully formed adult. You start your career, you start working, you start engaging in relationships and building actual long-lasting relationships, maybe getting married, but you are doing all the hard things. Your career doesn't really start here. Your career starts once you learn to do the work. Because when you're 30 is when it really starts to set in. Your 30s are for achieving mastery. You've had some time in the workforce, you pushed the paper, but now you have the skills and the know-how to actually make things happen. If you have a family, you are generally past the rough beginning stages of parenting and you're starting to hit a rhythm. You are achieving mastery. By the time you get into your 40s, you are at peak you. Theoretically, you should be making more money now than you will in your entire career. If you have a family, they are becoming fully fledged adults as children. Your relationship has matured by now, and you have peaked. Enter the midlife crisis. Most people have that midlife crisis not because they've peaked, but it's because they've peaked and they see what's on the other side. They know that they are more now potentially than they ever will be, and that their future performance couldn't possibly rival what they're doing now. Then as you get into your 60s, then you're looking to just transfer over your knowledge. Maybe you have grandkids at this point. Your kids will actually listen to you. You're setting yourself up to just transfer everything on to the next generation. And then as you continue to pass, you're preparing for the end. And you're just lucky for every day that comes across. So what I'm suggesting, bearing in these stages, is let's look at just 2 points in our life. As we're trying to plan our life, let's look at 2 critical places and let's work backwards from those. When we're doing this, you have to envision yourself at these stages. This isn't some magical fairy tale version of you that if you win the lottery, this is who you become. No, we have to take into consideration the reality of things. And when we're taking into consideration reality, we have to ground it in our most likely possibilities. So one thing that I always like to do is assume that I am insanely average. Because chances are you, like me, are very average. And when we do that, we can think about our time, our money, our longevity, our statistical averages, all of those things we get to factor in to these periods. So let's start, before we get into those 2 periods, let's talk about money in all this. Because it likely, if you're thinking about things way in the future, whether that be your career or your family or who you're going to be, money is going to play a key role in that. Now, you might have some above average earning potential, but let me just walk you through what average actually looks like. The median annual earnings for a full-time worker right now is between $60,000 and $65,000 a year. As an individual, you could realistically plan to hit $65,000 a year. The median household income is $80,000 a year. So factoring in any 2-partner households that are both making money as well, but that median is going to sit at $80,000. That is what average looks like. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about when I started my journey in looking at my future selves and planning my life and career. I was in college trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I'd already changed majors a few times, And I didn't have much guidance and I didn't have many blueprints. So I went to the early internet to try to find some answers. I came across a study done by, I believe it was Dave Ramsey in the early to mid 2000s. And this study was trying to promote the idea of the ideal income for happiness. So, what income provided the most happiness inside the bracket? When I read this, I was initially thinking the first thing that came to mind, 200,000. I could live pretty well on 200,000. Maybe it was a million. God, a million would be nice because then you wouldn't have to worry about anything. In reality, it was neither of these. And in the mid 2000s, it was $75,000. Now, reading the article and doing some mental gymnastics on my own to work backwards into why this number was so critical and why it produced so much happiness, here's kind of what came up. One, it was attainable. Most household incomes can reach $75,000 a year. It takes some work. It might take some overtime. It might take two incomes. But especially today, $75,000 is a number that most people can hit. Just look at the average and median statistics that I've already shared. Most people can hit this. So it was attainable. The other thing is, given this was a while back, but it provided enough. Not a lot, but enough. You could afford a mortgage payment on a house. You could afford a car. You could afford groceries for your family. Take one or two vacations a year and even save for retirement. Now, is this the most lavish lifestyle? No. It probably meant a very modest house, not in a city center, and it probably meant a second-hand or lower tier new car. It probably meant average food, eating out maybe once a week. And it probably meant standard vacation, think family road trip. With retirement fund that could get you retired by 65 or 70 and live comfortably until you expire. Now, that is more or less the American dream. You got a house, you got a car, you got a family, and enough to get by. Nowhere in the American dream did it say that your house had to be 3,000 square feet or your car had to have leather seats. Nowhere in any of those statistics were those things deemed requirements. No, just the basics. So I could buy into this. See, I grew up pretty poor. I actually didn't know anyone that made $75,000 a year at the time. So that seemed like quite an aspirational goal from the get-go. But I figured I could do that. So I even built myself a buffer, and here's how I did that. Rather than $75,000, I wanted a little bit more. I set my ideal income at $100,000. The reason is I knew that I wanted a little bit more than the bare bones, and that gave it to me. I picked a major and a career that $100,000 a year was attainable. Not easy, but attainable. And I knew that inflation was going to catch up with my generation at some point. I also didn't have the illusion that I was going to have a ton of Social Security waiting for me in retirement, and so I knew that I needed to save more. $100,000 felt like a pretty solid life for me. So I picked it. I picked a major that worked into it. I picked a job that allowed me to get the promotions to get there. I even got married and we led a dual income life that helped us maintain that securely. So I planned it and it worked out okay. But the key was actually picking a realistic goal and working towards it. Because here's the thing, I could have easily said I wanted to make $200,000 a year, gone and tried to be a doctor or a lawyer, and possibly even hit that. But I really didn't think as much about it when I was planning as I found out later that there are trade-offs. I've found in my career that every time I topped about $90,000 a year, trade-offs really crept in. That meant more responsibility, more stress, more travel, more hours. And as I started to have a family, it really started to weigh on me. And so I would throttle that at times in my life and career where I took a step back and I made less money to make room for the other pieces of my life. But that constant goal of $100,000 stuck in my mind. I wanted to average that by the time I retired. So that meant that I could have years even where I was slightly below that, and then years where I could really put in the work and get above it. But that one number kept my career very much grounded. So, getting back to just the two main periods to focus on, the first one I'd like to pick is 45 years old. And I call 45 years old peak you. You see, Carl Jung actually had a whole bit about life begins at 40. And when you're not 40, it's hard to actually imagine that. What are you talking about? I'm living life now. I've got my own decisions, my own problems, all these other things. But here's a little bit of perspective in it. You know, for the first 20 years, you are learning and studying under the care of adults. You have adults to guide you and answer questions and, slip you a little bit of money when times get tough. You can always bounce back and live at home if you need to. You are living under the security of others. And then even as you graduate out of your 20s into your 30s, it's like learning how to walk again as an adult. You are acquiring all the skills to live on your own, and you're building that basic life that by the time you're 40, you should have most of those things figured out. You've got the knowledge, you've got the experience that you have a chance to actually live as you. Because even in your 20s and 30s, as an adult, you're not necessarily living for you. You're doing the grunt work. Remember, that's what the 20s are for. You're doing the grunt work for other people. When you hit 30, it kind of just increases. Your responsibility as you achieve your mastery starts to be more for other people than you. If you have a family, you put a lot of effort into them and not you. But at 40, you begin to live for you. Again, that's why midlife crises happen between 40 and 50. It's because for the first time in really your life, you have a fully formed version of yourself, and you can actually live for yourself and not other people at this point in time. What do you do with that? You mix that with the idea that you've achieved peak you. Everything from here is downhill. So, what does peak you look like? How much money does peak you make? What kind of house? What location do you live at? Do you have a family that you're taking care of? And whether you're a man or a woman, all of these things matter. What is your career? Do you like your job, or do you just work so you can go on vacation? How many vacations do you take a year? How much money is sitting in the bank? All of these things, if you're keeping in mind that the average income that you're probably going to make is between $60,000 and $80,000, you can actually look at how you would be spending that money at 45. So, I'll give you one little 45-year-old you test that really helped, me, and it actually helped me and my wife through numerous phases in our relationship and our growth, and that's the dinner table test. What does your dinner table at 45 look like? Is it in a nice house? Is it living remotely? Is there a tight knit family there? Or is it more community and friends? Are you alone? None of these answers are wrong, but they have to be yours. So, what does your dinner table look like? And you can work backwards from that. Now, the next period is 65, and that's your end state. This is more or less where the obituary test comes in versus the dinner table analogy. As you're winding down, do you have family close by, or are you just traveling the world? Do you have money in retirement, or are you going to be continuing to work? What do you want this period to actually look like for you in your end state? What do you want in your obituary? Because I know that average life expectancy is around 80, but the truth of the matter is, after 60, your mortality rate increases. The things that can come along and wipe you out do at 65. Every decision that you've made for your health and for your finances and for whatever family situation you've built, it really comes to total fruition here at 65. You don't have time to fix these things. So if you can picture what you want 65 to look like, you can work backwards. So, keeping those two periods in mind, 45 years old at peak you and 65 as it all starts to wind down, ask yourself these two questions. What do you want? What do you want? Not your parents, not your spouse if you have one already. What do you want? And be honest with yourself. Because the truth is I've met very few people that end up not in relationships without good social networks that wanted to land there. No, even if you decide not to have a family and kids, if that's not the direction that you're heading in, then you have to understand that you need some sort of social network to keep things going. And so, how do you want that to look? What trade-offs are you willing to make to get these things? So what do you want? The other thing is what is your true potential? True potential is a real touchy subject. Your true potential goes in to your talents, it goes into your time left on this earth, it goes into your interests, it goes into your actual intelligence and your emotional intelligence. All of these things make up your true potential. So what is your true potential? And be honest. Chances are you're going to find yourself in the average. Just statistically speaking, about 95% of us are going to live at some end of that average. So don't make the mistake of thinking that you're more special than you are, but allow yourself opportunities to grow and become better than average in certain areas of life. So what is your potential? If you have time, then you can build expertise over time. You can gain a lot of experience. If you have a thirst for learning, you're great at school, maybe college is your route. There are many things that require a college degree and all the trade-offs that come with them. But if that's what's going to make you happy by realizing your potential, do it. If your potential lies more in whether it's caretaking or physical labor, all of those things provide great paths to happiness. But the only time that you're just insanely unhappy is when you're acting against what you want and really stretching your true potential farther than's realistically possible. You know you better than anyone, so make those assessments. Another thing that you have to have are your non negotiables. What are your non negotiables? I can tell you what my two were. Mine was I didn't want to be poor. That was non negotiable. Whatever it took, I grew up poor and I wasn't going back. The other non negotiable I had was a stable family. I was willing to do whatever possible to ensure that I had a stable family. That went from choosing my partner to the way that we treat each other to the arguments that we're willing to have. All of those things translate as non-negotiables for me. And since I knew my non-negotiables, I could act intentionally. When I went on dates, I knew that I wanted a stable family. So as soon as I started dating someone, I could very confidently say, here's what I'm looking for. Does that align with you? And if it was way too far off from what that other person wanted, there was no reason in wasting each other's time in relationships. We have to be intentional and guided towards the things that we want. Now, just like investing, the earlier you can do it, the better. You've got more time to compound, you've got more time to work on it. But starting early and early in your life is not a must. There's an old analogy of if you want to sit in the shade of a tree, the best time to have planted it was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Same with investing. It doesn't matter what you've neglected to this point. It matters what you're doing now to move forward, because all this requires momentum. Momentum is just simply heading in the same direction and picking up speed. That's all momentum is. So if you're starting at 16 and you can get some concept of this in mind and start heading in that direction, you have plenty of time to pick up momentum before you hit your peak 45 or your 65 end state. If you're 30 and you're trying to do that, you can still achieve it. What your potential looks like is different because you don't have as much time. The amount of work that you have to put in, yeah, it might be more because, again, you don't have as much time to build momentum. It will change all your plans, but not doing anything is much more costly. By not establishing and pursuing your goals and being realistic on the potential outcomes, you're just not going to be able to achieve anything that looks like success, unfortunately. And it's not about happiness. Happiness is a byproduct. It's really about just being consistent and building your life, and the happiness comes along with it. Happiness is always going to be fleeting. So being happy is not one of those goals that you get to sit back and decide, because I think you'll find throughout your life that times of happiness and even unhappy times never look exactly how you thought they would. But I hope that you keep in mind that there is no formula for this. This is one strategy that's, it's worked for me, but it may not necessarily work for you. But it is a great thought experiment to jump into and figure out what you might want and how to steer yourself in the direction of your goals. Setting goals is very hard. Maintaining them is even harder, but I hope that you can point yourself in a direction, gain some momentum, and really